Locked On College Hoops and the Locked On Carolina podcast. He's our guy, Isaac Schade. What's up, Isaac? How you doing?
Hey, Brian, I'm good, man. It's great to be with you. I wish it was just to not be talking about squaring off against each other, but we'll take it.
Yeah, we'll take it here. And, man, I'm sure you're having a lot of the same conversations as we have about Adrian Autry every day around here. What's the current Hubert Davis vibe down in Chapel Hill? It sounds like there is unrest amongst the locals here in a struggling season for the Tar Heels.
Yeah, absolutely. It was so funny. I was ready to come on and commiserate about just that exact thing. It's funny, we both have coached early on in their tenures at these new schools, but in this portal and NIL era, there's just not the same longevity that you're afforded to be able to, get your guys and get your thing figured out. If you can't get it going in a year or two, as we saw with Kenny Payne at Louisville, bye-bye, you're out the door, and that's the conversations we're probably both having right now, yeah.
And that's what's crazy about Hubert Davis, because he has gotten in and going to get points, right? They were a 1 seed last year. They made the title game 3 years ago. Besides that, it's been a rocky ride. Missed the tournament in between, and this year maybe lining up to do the same. Is that what's the hardest to square right now at Carolina? Used to annual success, and we've seen the pops, but we're not seeing the consistency right now?
Absolutely it is. The back and forth, it's I literally talked on an episode of my show earlier this week. The thing we have to be able to do is to isolate what the issue is, and how do you get to figuring out what that variable is. And even as I look back, let's remember the end of the Roy Williams era was not sunshine and roses either. Had there been a tournament in 2020, Carolina would have missed it. In 2021, Carolina loses to Wisconsin in the first round. Literally the only time in Roy Williams' entire career that he lost in the first round. So it's it is an extended 6-year issue for the Tar Heels right now. And so I think there is an area, for me personally, I would like to see Hubert Davis get another year in Chapel Hill. What I think has to happen is that he's got to be something I've talked about is instead of paying his buyout and instead of paying to hire a new coach, use that money to get him the guys he needs and to get him the general manager he needs and let him cook. As you said, he was a 1 seed last year. He's been to the national championship game, albeit in a year where things didn't necessarily go great the whole year. But it's the capability. So let's get him the things he needs around him. And then, if it doesn't go well, then I understand your hands are tied and you got to pull the trigger.
Yeah, and this is where I think it's the Carolina, because obviously you look at Carolina, Cuse, and Duke, all have gone from Hall of Famers and switched to assistants at their school. And the Duke's one has gone the smoothest, but they were also the program running the smoothest at that point. I look at Carolina and Syracuse. There had been slippage late with Jim Boeheim and Roy. Right. How much, we talk about it all the time with Red, how much with Hubert, since he was on that staff, is he getting the retroactive blame for the slippage as well? Because I think that's what we're hearing a lot here. It's hard to separate that, right? When you were on the staff, but you weren't the head coach yet.
Yeah, that is a hard thing to swallow because it's different in the Duke scenario because John Shire had been named head coach in waiting for that whole year of trade-off, right? In neither the situation for the Orange or for the Tar Heels did they have that, right? For Carolina, Hubert Davis, they didn't even know that right. Roy Williams was going to retire until April Fool's Day of 2021, and so then it was just then it became known that it was Hubert Davis. But what is unknown, and I don't know, you might know more obviously about the Syracuse side of it, was how much internally was Roy Williams already thinking about this and leaning toward giving Hubert Davis some of those opportunities. Obviously, he coached, Carolina still has the JV program. Hubert Davis coached that. But outside of that, it's hard to know. But, yeah, fairly or unfairly, you're going to shoulder some of that blame.
Yeah, and that's just we're certainly seeing it at Carolina. We're seeing it at Syracuse. We're not seeing it at Duke because they're succeeding it to the level. And we look at Miami and Florida State and Virginia, it's circling the league right now. It seems like half the ACC is dealing with this right now.
Yes, well, and Leonard Hamilton now too. And so, Brian, next year, you might have this in your head already, but the longest tenured ACC coach next year is going to be Brad Brownell.
Yeah.
The second longest tenured coach in the ACC next year is Kevin Keatts, who wouldn't be at NC State right now had they not had that miracle run last year. I mean, so this is a thing in the ACC and has to be part of why we see the struggles that we don't see in the SEC, Big Ten, and Big 12.
Yeah, what do you make of the league this year? Because we've talked about this. I think like last year and the year before, the struggles were – it was overblown. Like the metrics were telling a story that reality wasn't necessarily backing up. This year, the metrics and reality are in lockstep. Like the league's not very good this year. What is it? Is it NIL? Is it all these Hall of Fame coaches leaving? Is it talent? What do you put your finger on this year?
I think it's a mixed bag of a lot of those things, Brian. I think one of the things the SEC multiple years ago. I commissioned this, but they put together a thing to figure out why isn't the SEC succeeding at basketball. And the number one thing that they identified was rock star head coaches. And I don't mean that like in terms of celebrity, just in terms of like being dudes, right? Mm-hmm. And now you look at the head coaches in the SEC, and I think I would have to take that slate of coaches over what we have right now. And so I think that is a critical part of it. I think there's the discrepancy in the media money that the SEC and Big Ten get versus what the ACC and Big 12 get, which doesn't necessarily translate to what you can pay players, but it's a trickle-down effect that does affect the players you get. And so consequently now we have a higher caliber of player throughout the conference of the SEC and the Big Ten. And because the bloated conference now, we can no longer say, well, it just stinks because the ACC is bigger and our bottom end isn't as good. Look, that is true now of all of the Power 5 conferences in basketball, save the Big East, which is still sitting at 11.
Yeah, they're the only ones that's kind of aside from all of that right now. So we got our guy Isaac Schade with us of the Lockdown College Basketball podcast. All right, as far as the actual on-court stuff for Carolina this year, I think we all saw last year ended. R.J. Davis came back. It's like, whoa, they're bringing back the ACC Player of the Year. That's kind of wild. What is R.J. this year? Because his numbers are down across the board. Is it he's not playing as well? Is it defenses are throwing the kitchen sink at him? What do you put a finger on here this year?
It's a great question, Brian. We started to see it toward the end of last year when teams started guarding R.J. with length. One of the biggest issues for Carolina as a team is size. Backcourt and front court. I mean, it's across the board. That's a big storyline, by the way, for the game on Saturday. But with RJ, he's only 6'1", and so last year, like Duke put Tyrese Proctor on him, for example, and so those kinds of Alabama in the Sweet 16 loss, they used length on RJ Davis. Consequently, it was the only game all season he didn't hit a three. Those kind of things. And then I think RJ started to feel like take on too much of the load this year. Armando's gone. Armando Bacot is gone. And so then that defensive attention that was being paid to both Bacot and Davis is now focused on RJ Davis. And that makes life harder because there's not another offensive player commensurate with what RJ can do. Here's what's interesting to me, Brian. Ian Jackson, the very talented freshman, had taken on a great load of that, had hit 20-plus in 6 out of 7 games, starting 14 games ago. In the last 7 games, though, Ian Jackson has only hit double figures once, and in fact had his first bagel as a Tar Heel 2 games ago. In the last 7 games, though, R.J. Davis, like it completely lines up, has become R.J. Davis. In the last 7 games, he's shooting 48% from the field, 43.9% from three, and 90.9% from the free throw line. So suddenly, in the last 7 games, R.J. Davis is R.J. Davis. And my hypothesis on that is it's happened as teams have had to put more focus and attention on Ian Jackson. It's freed up RJ to have less defensive attention paid to him. Okay,
yeah, interesting. It'll be interesting to see guard him with length. That's not, depending on what Syracuse does Saturday, that's not exactly something they've got to be able to do. So we'll see how they rotate that around. Just to verify, just to make sure, Armando Bacot is gone, right? Like he doesn't have like a 7th year. He's not still hanging around somewhere.
He is done and gone in a very distant memory, as you'll see a completely different front court that doesn't hold a candle, unfortunately, to Reverend Bacot.
Yeah, this is the first time I can recall that, like, Syracuse when you look at Lampkin, may actually have a size advantage against North Carolina in one of these ACC games. I mean, you think of Carolina for 30 years, you think they always got a big guy. This has to be very strange for them not to have a guy like that.
It is. Not only is it strange, I think it's unsettling for most of the fan base, Brian. Like, they don't know what to do. And in fact, I just recorded my show for tomorrow, and in that, I said, look, I am plenty concerned and worried about J.J. Starling, as any, right? But because of Carolina's lack of an Armando Bacot type or a Kennedy Baker, whomever you want to say, I'm actually more concerned with Eddie Lampkin for Saturday's game because of the literal weight that he can throw around that Carolina can't match. The heaviest person on Carolina's roster is 35 pounds less than Eddie Lampkin, and that's Jalen Washington. And so you look at that, and you think, okay, so what do you do defensively? Do you double down on him? Well, great. If you do that, Eddie Lampkin is the third leading assist man for this team. He can kick out. And I know Syracuse isn't a great three-point shooting team, but if you double down and give a shooter a wide-open look, that spells trouble. And so, yes, I'm worried about J.J. Starling, but truly, Eddie Lampkin, the second he entered the transfer portal from Colorado and put his name in at Syracuse, I felt sweat trickle down my back, Brian Higgins.
All right. Last thing for you, Isaac Schade. What do you think's going to happen in this game? Well, we've gone full name here. What do you think's happening on Saturday? Because, like, Syracuse games, they've become a bit of a fool's errand to predict here the last few weeks.
You know what's funny? It's the exact same true thing for Carolina, too. It's funny, Carolina has faced a just slog of a season. Their non-conference schedule was the sixth strength of schedule in the nation. And then you add all that, they've front-loaded the ACC. And so right now on paper, Carolina has 6 games before facing Duke for the regular season finale. In that stretch of games, Carolina plays 6 teams, including Syracuse, who are out to top 85 in the net. So on paper, Carolina should be able to go on the road to Syracuse and do work. But this is the same Carolina team that needed to go to overtime at home against Boston College.
Right. This
is the same Carolina that has had multiple double-digit first-half leads lately and squandered them. And so it's so funny. You use the phrase fool's errand. I'm in that exact same boat. So basically my prediction is that this is a close game late. Carolina, 9 of their 12 ACC games, the score has been in one possession, one way or the other, with 3 minutes to go. Literally 9 of their 12 ACC games. So I'm looking at this and saying, this is going to be a close game, and what it's going to come down to is which team can execute better down the stretch. I cannot quit calling the carrier, don't I? Apologize. And then... And that's ultimately what's going to – so is it J.J. Starling that makes a play late? Is it R.J. Davis or somebody else like that? And so ultimately, I mean, I've got to ride with the Tar Heels. Hopefully, that doesn't anger Orange fans too much. But I legitimately think it's probably like a 3-point – give me like 471 Carolina.
Yeah, it's 2 teams that both played Boston College in overtime at home recently. So,
exactly. But triple OT for you guys, right?
It just kept going. It kept going and going, Isaac. We had to wait a minute to start the postgame show on Saturday. All right, man. Always great to chat some hoops. I'm sure we'll catch up again before the end of the season, but thanks for hopping on for a few today.
Man, that sounds great, Brian. Good luck this weekend, buddy. Always